What's going on, guys? Beckham here. And today we have our first edition of Quotes with Beckham, a series where I take a quote, we break it down, dissect it, talk about it, and just get our overall thoughts on it. I give you my commentary, and you guys let me know what you think down in the comments below about what the discussion was today. I love quotes. Who doesn't, right? And today, I have a bunch of quotes saved up in my notes on my iPhone, and so I figure, why not make a series out of it? Just have a conversation. Let's just have some fun. So today, I felt it was only necessary, given the fact that this is my first video on this, to start with the great Jordan Peterson. He's definitely someone I consider an inspiration, a mentor, if I could. I don't know if that's appropriate. I haven't met him face to face. I did meet him live. I did see him live, and when he did a show in Austin, Texas, and I thought it was phenomenal. So getting to see him live was definitely a goal of mine. I achieved that, and in my notes section, I have a bunch of quotes by him, and so I only felt it was right that as we start this journey together, that I share a quote by him that I thought really meshed well with the creative process, and I'll read it to you right now. So it goes as follows. If you're going to make beautiful things, putting real restraints on what you allow yourself to do facilitates creativity instead of interfering with it. Jordan Peterson. I thought this was really powerful in that I think that when you think about creativity and what it encapsulates, what it takes to be quote unquote creative, I think a lot of times we overthink it. And maybe sometimes we overthink it, but I think it's a lot of overthinking on what it means to be creative. And as the saying goes, nothing new under the sun. So being creative and being original in the year 2025 feels like a daunting task because we have thousands of years of human history and you feel like no idea is new per se. But I don't think being creative and being original aren't always the same thing. And I don't think just because you aren't necessarily original, you can be creative in a way that inspires people, right? As you might have heard that. Okay, let's back up. I think that you when you think about stories like Star Wars, I use Star Wars as an example of how it's the same kind of general baseline storytelling concept told over and over again throughout history in various different forms, and Star Wars is one of our most recent iterations of that. I know I say recent, I know it's been decades now since the story first came out, but it's one of the more popular things that I could use as an example. And so why I chose this quote was because I think it has some weird wisdom behind it. I think when we think about being creative, you think about you start with a blank canvas, and you can fill that canvas with anything your heart desires. And there's real beauty in that because who knows what you can come up with. But I think with what I will refer to as unmitigated freedom, we assume that it will fuel us to be our best creative selves when it can ultimately stifle us and leave us stuck in, this vast sea of everything and nothing at the same time, if that makes any kind of sense, right? I think that when you think about creativity and why this quote is so powerful, putting restraints on what you're allowed to do can foster a certain kind of creativity because you give yourself guidelines to abide by. And when you work within those guidelines, it could be comforting in a way. It's more, in a way, I would argue, it's more freeing than just having no boundaries at all. Because if you only know you're only working in certain guidelines, that means that whatever you have to work with is what you have to work with. And that can really just mold and put to form your thoughts and ideas and what you're able to accomplish. I think I think about anime a lot, right? So I'm an anime fan, as I'm sure many of you are who are listening to this. And so when you think about power structures, right? Think about like a Naruto, a Jujutsu Kaisen, a Tokyo Ghoul, whatever restrictions that they have within those respective universes. That's going to dictate what they can and can't do. And when you have those restrictions, one might look at it and think to themselves, oh, well, I can't do this, I can't do that, that sucks, that's annoying. And, you might have that perspective, and, fair enough. I'm not going to say you're wrong in that regard. Art is like that. But I also think that when you put those restrictions, it actually makes for a more interesting story, a more compelling story. Because if you know that your protagonist has working with certain restrictions, he can only do certain things, it's going to be able to allow you to foster all the ways in which they can work with what they can work with, and really just flesh out a full narrative and a full power system in this example that I'm giving, that can be, although it has restrictions, it can be robust in those restrictions. Think about, I'll use another example. Think about sports, right? Think about soccer. So I've been getting into soccer recently, and on a personal level, and I've been learning about the game more. I know it's never really been popular in America, but I think it's cool to be learn something new that I've always had exposure to it, but just never really made much thought until, again, very recently. But in soccer, you can't use your hands, right? You have to essentially play with your feet, and that restriction allows for the beauty that you see within soccer. It allows you to take notice of all the skills that they're using with their feet, whether it's, if I'm saying this correctly, la croqueta, roulette, crossover, all these beautiful techniques that they use in soccer that I'm really starting to appreciate. And that all is a product of having that restriction, and then letting that foster into other creative avenues. Or think about boxing. You can't kick like you could in like a Muay Thai or kickboxing. But when you look at the sweet sciences, they call it, you look at how creative they can be, how illustrious they can be in their movements. And that's all because, hey, you're only working with a certain box. You're working within a small box, and you have to be able to maximize that box and maximize your talent and creativity within that box. So it's things like that, right? I think that again, we assume that having unmitigated freedom is always going to work to our benefit, and maybe that's true, but I think a lot of times it isn't. I think there's a beauty in putting guidelines and restrictions on what we can and can't do, and to allow it to foster into having a much more, what you may find is having a much better product at the end of the day. And I think that I don't think that's just that just stops at creativity. I think that's a life thing, right? I think that when you look at your life as a whole, on the individual level, like, we live in society, we have rules and regulations, and you might feel on a personal level that those rules and regulations restrict you from expressing your fullest self. And it's a whole philosophical debate on how that can play out. I would say that in society, as people, we need certain rules and regulations to lead the most productive lives we can, because if we don't have certain restrictions and rules and regulations, again, we're actually stuck at the possibility of everything. We're exposed to everything, and we don't know how to move forward. We don't know how to make progress. We can't even really understand what progress could mean when everything and anything is open and available. I hope that makes sense. And so creating guidelines and restrictions allows you to move forward and move with purpose and give your life meaning, right? I think about it, let me go full circle back to anime, right? When you think about Gojo and Jujutsu Kaisen, his limitless technique and his infinite void, and I remember he was fighting, what was his name, Jogo, if I get that right, and how he opened his domain expansion, and Jogo got caught in the unlimited void. And I think he made a quote, I'm going to paraphrase here, isn't it interesting that when you have everything available to you, you can do nothing? And I think that sums it up perfectly. And so I just want to share those thoughts. Yeah, so like I said, this is going to be our first edition of the Quotes with Beckham our first edition of the Quotes with Beckham, video series. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Give me honest feedback, and we can chop it up in the comments. I really want to see what you guys think about this. This is something I just really like doing, and maybe I just keep it going for a little bit, see how it goes, and just share with you guys my honest thoughts, and we can go from there. So until next time, guys. See ya.